Good to be back with you guys this week. I was off last week, and for those of you that didn't know, my stepfather, Bryant Rowley, passed away, and this church has been unbelievably supportive. I just want to take a personal moment to say thank you guys for all your thoughts and prayers and support and love that you've shown for me and my mom and our whole family. And last week we took off after the funeral just because we had so many family members in town, and so that gave us a chance to spend some time with them. So I want to thank you guys for that, and also for Pastor Dave Clefman that had a must-hear message about summer vibes. So I don't know about that, but anyway, no, I'm just playing. No, I heard it, and it was absolutely awesome, and I appreciated that message. So if you didn't get to hear that, please check that out. And I also wanted to mention one other thing before we get started today. If you guys noticed, if you've never been here before, then you might not have noticed this. But anybody that's been here, if you look over there where the parking lot is, can we just give God a hand clap of praise for that now that house is gone after 4 years. We thought we could get it done as soon as we merged. You guys don't know, we're a merged church that merged two churches together, and we've been trying to get that done for 4 years, and now it's finally done, and that's awesome, right? We take our time with that. But I do want to give some special thanks because I know that it was a big project for everybody. For our board, for our church, we have some incredible leaders. For Charles Brock, who is on our board, but he also oversees our facilities. We say operations, but that really consists of facilities right now, and that was a monumental task. For John Paul Creason that helped set that up, and for Sean Domer, and for James Alexander, and there's so many other ones that I could mention, but we won't have the chance to do that, but I do appreciate them. And when I said James Alexander, I meant James Anderson. But anyway, there's so many other ones, but I did want to just take a moment because that's a huge thing for us, and we'll be able to utilize that space. We got more to come. We didn't get rid of everything in there, but it is being stored at people's houses, so if you needed anything from the barn, good luck. I have no idea where it is. I was off last week, and they took care of all of that without me. That's never happened in the history of this church, but I don't even know where anything is. But anyway, I do appreciate it so much. It's funny that would be that it just happened and all the other things that are happening because of what we're going to talk about today. Today we're coming back to a series that we started before I left. Dave stepped in and he preached a message for me very unexpectedly, and I appreciate that, and it was an incredible message. But we had started a series called Journey of Faith. We're taking a look at lessons from the life of Abraham. And today, here's the question I want to ask you. Do you like to wait? Anybody? Raise your hand. All right. You kind of heard that even about the thing. I won't get into the county stuff. We're not going to even talk about that. If you live in Isle of Wight, then you'll just play. All right. Do you like to wait? I don't think anybody does, right? Or if you do, but anyway, we'll see about that, right? I know for me, I hate waiting. There's many things that I hate about waiting. One is on the ride to church this morning. Me and Marie were running late. I don't want to talk about that, but anyway, that's a whole different thing. My wife was driving, and I'm not going to say she used bad language of the car that was in front of us that slowed us down, making us even later. And I don't want to mention any names, but it was somebody that goes to church here, Dave Clefman. But anyway, I'm just playing. Now, actually, Dave was on time, so I don't think it was you. It looked like your van, though. I know you're getting older. I don't know, whatever, right? It's funny how that works, right? All of a sudden you change demeanor when you see them. You're like, oh, hey, but behind them, if they could read your lips, they would, right? I'm just playing. How many people like to wait? If you're in Isle of Wight County, then you must like it because they're working on every single road that we have right now, right? Including our neighborhood. I live in Windsor Woods. And they ripped up Windsor Woods 5 months ago, and they just now, I don't know if they're done yet, but anyway, we have pavement, after 5 months, and it would take forever to get out of our neighborhood. I hate to wait, right? Anybody pay to wait? You know what I'm talking about with that? I asked somebody, I was like, hey, we've never been on a cruise. We don't really think we would like it, but we were thinking about it. And somebody goes, oh, it's great. But you know what you do? You wait in lines. The whole time you pay to wait in lines. Or how many people have done that for Busch Gardens? You go, hey, I actually pay to go there to wait in lines in the heat. And, anyway, you pay for that. We did. We stopped doing it now, but anyway. Fast food. Anybody? You know what I learned about fast food? It's not fast, and it's not food. I'm just playing. And it's not cheap. But what really gets me, though, and I don't want to mention this in any names because that would be Dairy Queen. But anyway, sorry, I've done that twice now. You can edit that later. I do love Dairy Queen. But you know what they do that really gripes me is when you pull through the line and you're waiting to get your Blizzard, and then they say, hey, they swipe your card to hand it back, and they say, could you pull up? I'm like, no. You know who I hate to wait. And we joked around about it, but let me ask you a question. Is anybody waiting on something pretty serious? Or maybe you've even been praying and you're going, God, I don't know where you are in this. And you're about to say, you know what? I don't know what God wants, but I'm going to decide something. Something's better than nothing. If that's where you are today, I want you to lean into this. Because the message we have for you today is probably one of the most important ones as it relates to your faith. Because the key to faith, real faith in God, is learning to wait on him. Learning to wait on God is what we're going to talk about today. Today we're continuing our series about the life of Abraham. Before I was off last week and all this stuff happened with BK, we had started this series, and just to give you an idea of who Abraham is, just a reminder, Genesis 12 is kind of where we started the series and where the life of Abraham really starts, where God comes to Abraham. In ancient Mesopotamia, which is an empire, in a place called Ur of the Chaldeans, and the word of the Lord came to Abraham, and it said this. The Lord said to Abram, by the way, I just want to tell you two things, that Abraham has a wife, her name is Sarah. But before God changed their names, and we'll get into that later, his name was Abram, and her name was Sarai. So if you see it here, you're going, who is this, and why is the name different? But it's the same person. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household, to a land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. He's saying, not only will I bless you, but you yourself will be a blessing to the world. And he promised them two things. In the first message in this series, we kind of covered the first part where he said, I want you to go, but I'll show you when you get there. And we kind of had a whole message about going without knowing and how to navigate through that. So if you missed it, you can go back and listen to that. And then the second message, we talked about pitching your tent in the right direction, that Abraham did that, but his nephew Lot, there was kind of a dichotomy when they separated, that Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom. A good man, but pitched his tent in the wrong direction. You can go back and listen to both of those. But there was two promises that God made him. I'm going to give you a land, but I'm also going to make you a great nation. Now that sounds fine from your descendants, except for Abraham didn't have any descendants. And when God called him out of Ur of the Chaldeans, he was 75 years old. He's kind of getting late in life to start over. Anybody 75 years old here today? Anybody's wife is 65? Don't raise your hand, okay? Right? But that's a little late to start a family, right? And they're kind of excited. And I got to tell you, for ladies, that was one of the most incredible moments for Sarah, because while they were wealthy and they had everything and they took care of their nephew Lot like he was a son, there's something about having a kid and giving somebody hope that they'll have a child. And then all the other things that we have today, we're going to kind of fast forward 10 years. For us in the Bible, it's just 4 chapters, from chapter 12 to chapter 16. That's 10 years. A lot happens in 10 years, right? You go from being 75 to 85. There's a little difference, right? Your wife goes from being 65 to 75. That's a big difference. Here's where we pick up today. Genesis 16 and verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children after 10 years, right? You see, maybe you don't feel that because you could very easily read this story and go, I don't understand. God said this, and why are they getting upset? But after 10 years passes, what do you feel like? And then it gives an inference, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. I want to pause there and say, you know when I believe they picked up Hagar? In fact, we kind of know this. 10 years ago when they went to Egypt. If you read in chapter 12, we kind of mentioned it, the last message that I had about Lot, that one of the things that happened to them after they got into the promised land and they had built an altar and they were really following God, they didn't pray about going down to Egypt. Most people don't talk about that. You know, this is the kind of thing you go, hey, that happened in the family, but we just don't talk about it. But it was a big deal to them. Lot got a taste for what it was like in Egypt. We talked about that in the series with Lot. It was a mistake that Abraham made. I'm not saying it was a mistake that they picked up Hagar. She seems to be a great person, but she had been with them for about 10 years. Now, I want to cover one thing because I understand that it would be very easy right now to say, is slavery immoral? And the answer is absolutely yes. That was never God's intention for a person to own another person. In their culture, it was normal. She was considered a bondservant in another place. That means that she was a slave that was a slave by choice. That they treated her well. There's nothing to say that they were mean to her, but we'll just get this out of the way, that you're right. It's wrong to own a slave, and it causes all kinds of problems. But it was in their culture, right? You don't want to just cancel somebody just because they made a mistake culturally and we're judging them by today's standards. But I did want to get that out of the way so you know we're not saying that it's right that they did this. They had been there for 10 years. You see, they believed God at first, but now it's 10 years later. What do you do now? What do people say after 10 years, right? You left your homeland to follow God, and in the first couple months, everybody's going, well, that's great, and you got to the land, and you're getting postcards from home and Christmas cards, and then you start getting the questions like, hey, how's it working with your God after year one, right? It's crazy that God said you were going to have a child. Are you sure you heard that right, Abraham, or are you having a senior moment? You get the idea? You sure you heard that, or you just had bad pizza and you had a vision? But it doesn't seem like it's working out because it's been 10 years and now it's getting a little ridiculous, right? Anybody feel that? Is that where you are? Let me ask you a question. How well do you wait on God? Because I'm going to tell you something. It's going to make you or break you. It's going to bless you or curse you. Verse 2. Maybe listen a little bit faster because that took a while to get through it first. Okay. So she said to Abram, this is Sarah, the Lord has kept me from having children. You see the blame? Are you praying that way? You have something that you know God has called you to, and you know that it's going in this direction, and now it's getting more difficult and more difficult. And let me tell you something. Be careful how you judge Sarah for saying this. Have you ever not had fertility? You know anybody like that? It's one of the most sensitive things on the planet. You might not know that. I do as a pastor. You know, every Mother's Day, it's one of the happiest days of the year for a mother that has children. It's one of the saddest days of the year for people that can't have children. There's just as much grief on that day as not. So believe me, be careful how we feel about Sarah. But she's directing it, right? You feel that. Let me ask you, husbands, what do you do with that? When your wife feels that way. Here's what she says to him. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. Okay. Before I get into break this down a little bit, can I just ask one question? Does anyone think this is a good idea? Anybody? Anyone. I mean, whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're the worst sinner on the planet, right? I mean, you're going, well, that's not good, right? I mean, who came up with that, right? Now, I want to be clear about something, and I'll say it again, right? I'm not saying the culture was right, but it will add something that this was the cultural norm in their day. If a person couldn't have a baby, then what they would do is if they had a slave, now some cultures were different, and I don't think Abraham and Sarah were, that doesn't mean they're weird sexual people or anything like that. It doesn't mean they had a sex slave. That's not what it means. It means that if the person consented, you would take another wife. They had that back then, which I got to tell you, anybody think that's a good idea? To have two wives? I mean, one is more than enough, right? I'm just playing. All right, and that's a good way. You're so much that I'm messing with you. But I do want to say, this isn't about sexual temptation or any of that kind of stuff. This is about a cultural norm. That you could have a child through them, it doesn't mean that you're mistreating, although I will tell you, it was never God's intent, and there's always a price to pay, even if it's a systemic problem in your society. You pay a price, and they paid a price in their society. And he agreed. Let me ask you this, because it's so easy to judge them going, man, that's so stupid, and we don't follow that. But with your sexuality, do you follow what God says or the cultural norms? Do you make excuses that says, hey, I know what God says, but you got to understand this is how we do it now? If that's what you do, can I ask you something? Lean into this story because you're going to see something that might tweak you a little bit. Did I say this isn't going to be easy? Maybe I didn't say that. I hope you know it's not, but I got to tell you, it might be life-changing. Two problems that I see here. The first one is this. Sarah, she was making her decisions out of a frantic feeling, right? This came from a deep emotional place that no one but a mother or a mother that wants to be a mother could understand. That God, how could you do this to me? And now I'm trying to make a different decision and I'm trying to bring this to light. So maybe you heard from God and maybe you didn't, because you got to understand, God didn't say it to Sarah, he said it to Abraham. And it's been 10 years. And while I believe in Abraham, I left everything I had for him, and we've had a great marriage. But we need to get this done. I'm 75 years old, man. Right? Somebody there? You think your time's running out, and you're rushing God, and you're rushing the process, and you're saying, well, then if God won't do it, then I guess I just have to because God doesn't show up. If that's you, I want you to lean into it. That's the first problem I see. The second problem is Abraham's. Abram agreed, right? Let me ask you, in your marriage, in your spouse, in your relationships, do you agree even when you know it's wrong? Now, I know the saying, do you want to be right or you want to be married? I get it, right? I mean, I'm not talking about your version of the truth. What I'm talking about is this. I'm talking about appeasing your spouse instead of having the conflict, right? You know it's not right, but you go, I don't want to upset that, right? And who can blame him, right? I mean, that's his wife, and you're talking about one of the most sensitive subjects in the world, and she's going apoplectic, and she's going crazy. But please don't hear me say this is about a men and women thing. It goes both ways, because Marie could give so many examples about me, probably more about me than her. So I'm not saying this has got to do with whether you're the man or woman. I do find some men do this, where it's like, you know what, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy, so I'm going to do whatever she says. It doesn't matter if it's right or not. Do you do that? I know people do it in the church all the time. They'll bring them in, and then the husband will come in and yell at me, and you go, well, your wife did this. Well, it doesn't matter what she did, because if my wife said it, she's always right. And they do that from place to place. In fact, they've jumped from church to church to church because of that. Nobody's ever helped. And you think you're helping them? Agreeing and appeasing isn't the same as supporting. You should always support your spouse. But if you think that's a good thing, then I want you to lean hard into this story and see how it goes. Because you think you solved the problem, but I got to tell you, you haven't. That problem's going to reemerge, and you're going to see how it plays out. Doesn't go exactly like Abraham thought. I think he thought, hey, I'm just going to let her do what she has to do, and even though I know this isn't really right, I think it's just going to work out. Is that what you think? Okay. You know what the main problem is? No one seeked God. You know, the story of Abraham is nothing if it doesn't show. When Abraham built an altar to the Lord, he could do no wrong. God showed up in mighty ways in the life of Abraham. Whenever Abraham made a decision without seeking God, it always messed up. We mentioned that last week, that when he went down to Egypt, you know what happened to his nephew Lot? He got a taste for a different way of life. It was a price that Abraham didn't mean to pay. And then Abraham came back and repented, but Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom after that. And he said, like it was in Egypt. There were little inferences, right? That he didn't seek God on that. There was many other places you can read about Abraham. What I'm trying to tell you is this. Don't think because, by the way, Abraham's the greatest man of faith in the Bible. He's the greatest man of faith that the world has ever seen. So please don't hear me criticize Abraham. But even his faith wasn't built on Abraham as this great guru of faith. It had to do with him seeking God. And I'll bet you anything. If he could do it over again, he would give anything to go back to this moment and just ask God, right? Okay, verse 3. So after Abram had been living in Canaan for 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. You can almost hear the foreshadowing going, stop, right? Right? You ever look back at your life and you think that, right? It's like an area where you go, I wish I had, right? But you're watching it like a train wreck. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. And when she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Well, how did you think this was going to go, right? It's funny how you can, in your head, it sounded better, right? It seemed like a good idea at the time, right? Anybody had that? Did you not think that would happen? So there's tension. Do you feel the tension? Verse 5. Then Sarah said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Can I tell you what happens when you appease people? Can I tell you what happens when you go, yeah, they're emotional, and I'm just going to agree, and it doesn't matter how everybody sees it? They'll blame you in the end. You know that, right? And in a sense, it's your fault. You were their fail-safe, right? But you didn't stand up for them. You just told them what they wanted to hear, see? I'm not saying Sarah's right? There are two people that are wrong here. But if you don't believe that appeasing somebody is wrong, then you know what? Make this your life's verse, right? Write this down. Put this on your tattoo. And every time you think about being appeasing and going, I know what God says, but I don't want to upset, right? Then write that down and say, how did this work out? Maybe read the rest of this story, and you can see how it worked out. And say, hey, is that worth it? They will blame you. And by the way, you not only don't hurt them, you'll hurt everyone, including yourself. And you'll wonder, how did that happen? Because I sacrificed so much, and you'll be like, hey, after all I did for you, because hey, I don't think Abram he didn't have a attraction to Hagar. He loved Sarah. In fact, he did it because of her. But then he started to build a relationship with her, and it just causes tension. That's why I go, you cannot violate God's principles and then go, well, I guess it's just going to all work out, even if it's culturally relevant. You see what I'm saying? So important that we get this today. Because I have a feeling this is where somebody is. Or maybe you're getting ready to make a decision and this will be something that wakes you up. You see, the problem is this. You will harvest what you plant. Did you know that principle? You harvest what you plant. If you plant cotton, you don't get peanuts. Is that true? Right? Does everybody know that? Can I keep going down the list? If you plant apples, you won't get oranges. I can keep going if you'd like. You can't plant this in your life and expect a different result. And I know we think because we're Christians and we have an easy believism that says, well, Jesus died on the cross and forgives my sin, and that means whatever I do, he just takes care of, and there's no harvest. See? Is that what you think? I mean, you know you don't break God's principles, right? You get that, right? You know, we told the story about the lighthouse and the aircraft carrier. And the aircraft carrier thought it was a vessel, and he said, move. And the lighthouse is like, I'm a lighthouse. He was talking about taking countermeasures. And you're telling God to move, and he's saying, I don't move. My principles are solid. You will reap what you sow. In fact, Hosea, you can write these verses down. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. You see, Hosea, the prophet, wrote it this way. They sowed the wind, and they reaped the whirlwind. The whirlwind is destruction. It's like a tornado, right? I only sowed this little bit. You see, you reap, you harvest more than you sow. That's good and bad, by the way. So it's going to happen. You might pray for crop failure, but that's not the way it works, right? Sometimes I eat Cheetos and I say, Lord, make this into a carrot stick on the way down. It's never happened, okay? So I just want to make sure we're clear. I don't mean there's not forgiveness. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is don't think for a second you can just go, yeah, I know what the Bible says, but every time you think that, I want you to lean into this. Verse 6. Sarah said this to him, your slave, or actually Abram said this to Sarah, your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. And then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. How did this happen, right? You understand the problem isn't even the biggest problem. It's how they dealt with the problem. Like once they had the problem, and now she's pregnant, now they have a big problem, but now it's more about how they're dealing with the problem. How do they deal with the problem? The same way they've dealt before. They're not seeking God. They haven't first time prayed about this, right? You know why? Because I think they know what God would say. I tell you, they didn't seek anybody's advice because I think they knew what people would say, but in their minds it made sense, and in their minds they're going, you have to understand, and so we're not going to talk about it, and now all of a sudden they got a big problem, and so Abraham goes back to his coping skill. You know what it is? Passive. The passive man. And the man that appeases. I'll wash my hands of it. You do whatever you want. You know what he didn't do, which was probably better than what I would have done? It's your fault, right? You're the one that told me this, right? He didn't do that, at least. But he just agreed with her. And what happened? Sarah, who was hurt. Sarah, who was harsh and uncaring. And you know what else she was doing that's a big indicator? She was blaming. Can I tell you something about blame if you're ever doing it? It will never help you. even if the person was wrong. In this case, it wasn't. She's writing her own narrative to fit how she feels. Do you do that? See, I feel like this, and it's your fault, so I'm blaming God, and I'm blaming Abraham. And can I tell you something about that? That's a tale as old as time. Did you know that? You go back to Genesis 3, and you'll see it for yourself. From the very beginning, when man and woman decided to eat of the tree, right? The passive man who appeased his wife, and then blamed his wife, and then the wife blamed the husband, and they both blamed the snake, and now the snake doesn't have legs. Anyway, right? From all the blaming going on. It didn't help anybody. You think that helps? Is that what you had in mind? You see, these were good, godly people. We know that. That God, out of all the people on the planet, called Abraham out of the land of the Chaldeans, along with Sarah, who had a great marriage. You know what their problem was? They didn't wait for God. That's what the problem was. And it led to Sarah, a good, godly woman of faith, nobody better, abused Hagar. You know, Hagar's version of faith came from them. Do you know why I think she was willing to do this? This wasn't forced. This wasn't a rape. This wasn't sexual abuse. This was consent. In a culture that we don't understand, but we knew that she consented. She probably loved Abraham and Sarah, and she said, this is something I could do for you, you great people of faith who brought me out of Egypt, and now I see a different life, and I see how you love each other, and I want to be part of this. And now you're being abused by a godly woman, right? Why? Because she didn't wait on God. Hagar ran into the desert. She fled, that's what it says. We understand that where she was going was back to Egypt. Kind of the same path the children of Israel took, but the verse, right? When they came out of Egypt, she's running towards Egypt. And she gets pretty far as a pregnant woman running in the desert. Can you imagine? She don't know what to do. I want to talk to the Hagars in the room for just a minute. Anybody? You're running and don't know what to do. You're fleeing from people that abused you. People that were supposed to be good, right? Maybe they were even godly or religious, and now they're abusing. This is the part I want you to see. Verse 7. The angel of the Lord found Hagar out in the desert, away from everything, being abused, and no one wants you. A slave running that's pregnant, and nobody wants your baby. But you know who sees her? God. You know who found her? God. You know who cares about her? God. You know who cares about you? For all the Hagars in the room, God sees. God cares. God cares about the brokenhearted. God cares about the people that are abused. God cares about the ones that the world says you don't have value, and they devalue you and they abuse you. He wanted you to hear that today. For the people that have been abused by powerful people, and there doesn't seem to be justice in the world, it says that God found her. I want to highlight a word, though. The angel of the Lord. You can always put parentheses around that. We don't know for sure this, but I will give you an inference that typically when it says the angel of the Lord, it's a theophany, meaning God appearing in angelic form. We know that in other places because God comes to Abraham later and does the same thing. It's believed to be Jesus before Bethlehem, that he appears in different times in the Old Testament. People go, how could that be, right? God can do anything he wants. You understand? Whether it is or not, it really doesn't matter whether it's a messenger of God, an angel, or it's God himself. Either way, God is taking a personal interest in this story. That's the point. But I do believe it's a theophany. I believe it's Jesus. See, I think Jesus is there. If you were like Hagar, God found her. He was looking for her. By the way, here's what I think God's saying. The word of the Lord has come. He's found you today. He's speaking through this story 4,000 years later to tell you, I know exactly where you are, and I'm with you. And he wants to give you a word. The angel told her many things, and I'll let you read that for yourself. I believe it's Jesus told her many things. And then he said this about your baby. You see, a mom They don't care about a lot of things. I have a feeling Hagar didn't care about a lot of things, but she cares about this baby, right? And he says, you know what the name of your child will be? He will be called Ishmael. You know what that means? It means God hears. God hears you. God hears you. A better definition, the complete definition is, God hears you even in your misery. Somebody need that today? You think God doesn't see you, Hagar? He does. And he sees Ishmael as well. Doesn't matter how you got here. Doesn't matter who did it to you. Doesn't matter that that wasn't part of God's original plan. God has a plan. And God can help you. And God sees you. I'll show you what she said. We'll skip down to verse 13. Please go back and read the rest for yourself. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have seen the one who sees me. God sees you. All right? I want to wrap up this passage today with verse 16. There's so much more here. We'll come back to Abram. By the way, the angel said, go back. So she did. And then it says this, verse 16. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael. The inference there is huge. 86 years old. You've been in the promised land 11 years when God gave you Ishmael. Right? Oh, wait a minute. That was you. That was what you did, Abraham. And then 14 years after that, when Abraham is 100 years old, Sarah gives him a son, the son of promise, named Isaac. Wow. And can I tell you about this story? It's an amazing thing that Sarah had Isaac at 90 years old. But do you know what was the tension when she had Isaac? Ishmael, right? That's your fault. Because you didn't wait on God. The tension between the two, if you don't know there was tension, fast forward a little bit and read chapter 21. I won't read it to you today. You can read it for yourself, where Abraham had to send her away. You can read some of that in the Quran if you like, because the stories divert here. It created a whole different religion in the world. Right? If you don't know that, read it for yourself. It's a holy place where she ran back out in the desert and she found a well that an angel showed her because Abraham didn't take care of his own because of the problem that he caused. And there's been tension between Ishmael and Isaac. Oh, by the way, Ishmael is the father of the Arabic nations, if you didn't know. Many nations, not just one. And Isaac is the son of promise, who is the father of the nation of Israel. And they have been at odds with each other. Did you know? Just turn on your TV. I said this 10 years ago, and it's the same. For 4,000 years, they've been at each other. And you can ask yourself a question. Every time you think, you know what, I know what God says, but every time you think about appeasing rather than challenging, think about this. Is there peace in the Middle East? Ask yourself, just write it right here. And say, every time I think about violating God's principles, is it worth it? Just ask Abraham, right? I think he would give anything to go back. If I could give you a tweetable moment today, do we still tweet or X or whatever we call it? We don't do that. We don't need to do that. Y'all on Zoom out here, what? I don't. Our running ahead of God does not hurry our God. Our running ahead of God does not hurry up our God. There's your moment. Right? In fact, if anything, it slows it down. If you think you're going to rush God's timing, you're not. In a kind of way, God's timing is perfect. God's divine delays are perfect. So it's us adjusting to God, not the other way around. You cannot rush God's timing. So what I want to give you today is this: 4 things to learn how to wait on God. I took these from a great man of faith that's meant a lot in my life. I don't know him personally. I've met him one time, but his name is Chuck Swindoll. And if you don't like these points, you can email him at Insight for Living, and I'm sure he'll go. If you're watching right now, Chuck, I borrowed some of your stuff, and I know he would like that. 4 things. We're going to use wait as acrostic. 4 things to do. Number 1, walk a little slower. Walk a little slower. Now, I'm not talking about like we talked about when God says go, go. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when God hasn't been clear and you're wondering, when you've been waiting and you're thinking about maybe I should act. Maybe all I need to do is be decisive. I'm that kind of person, so I get it. This message is just as much for me as it is for you. I need to take action. I'm a man of action, and so being decisive is better than no action at all. Is that what you think? If you think that, go back and read this story again, and you'll go, oh, wow, I don't want that. All right. So walk a little slower. You know what that means? Pause. That will give you some time to do what you really need to do. You know what that is? Be still and know that he is God. Are you starting to understand? Because everything in you is want to act. Instead, you got to pause. You got to seek God. You know what else? Ask somebody else. Just get some advice. Can I tell you, the most ungodly person could have helped Abraham with this advice, right? And Sarah, right? I just asked the room, and you go, some of you guys, I know your life is really messed up, and you still said, that is bad, right? I mean, anybody could have told you if you just paused, right? If you just walked a little bit slower. And if I could ask somebody else, if you see somebody struggling in love, could you challenge them? You see, what a lot of us do is this. I could see it coming. I heard people say this. As a pastor, if you want to make me mad, or if you're on my staff, or if you're a leader, this is where I probably would fire you or just want you away from me, is if you went, I could see that coming, but I didn't want to say anything. Then shut up, right? I mean, I don't want to hear you now. Why are you telling me after the fact? I don't even believe you that you saw it coming. You can keep it to yourself now. But if you see it coming for a friend, it says in the Bible, the wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy. Don't just appease them. You getting me? You have a responsibility, right? Now, I'm not saying they'll listen to you. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll get mad at you and they'll never have a relationship. Are you so insecure that you want a relationship at any cost, including destroying their lives? Get involved. Do it in love, but challenge them. Walk a little slower. Challenge them just to slow down. I remember a friend of mine did that for me in the worst time of my life when I was about to make a frantic decision that would have changed everything. And at the end of the conversation, after I talked for an hour and shared some horrible things in my life, he said, I don't think I would do that. What you're thinking about doing right now, John, I don't think you should do that. That's all he said. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. Walk a little slower. You starting to understand? The A stands for ask. Ask for patience. I've heard it said, never pray for patience. Anybody? I'm saying the exact opposite. Pray for it. God wants you to have it. I know why they say it, because when you pray for patience, you're going to get it, right? But it's important. I want to read you a verse, 2 Peter. You can write it down if you want. 2 Peter 3, verse 9. It says this, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. I think somebody needs to hear this verse today because you wonder where God is and you're going, yeah, you're pretty slow because I need you to show up, Lord. And you haven't. And it's been 10 years. Maybe it's been longer, right? If that's you, then I want to tell you that God is not slow as we consider slowness. Instead, he is patient. He's patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. Now, I know this verse is talking about the gospel, and that's true. That why Jesus hasn't come back yet and set all the world straight yet is because God's not slow. He's waiting for everyone to come to repentance. But it applies here today, too. That he's not slow, he's patient. He wants you to have that patience, too. See? I think you'll start to learn that it's not you waiting on God, it's God waiting on you. To embrace God's process, see. God doesn't microwave, he crock pots you. I mean, you got to commit to the process. It's very important. God's not quick. He doesn't make things quick. There's no shortcut in God's kingdom. It doesn't work that way. The older you get, you start to learn it, right? The shortcuts that we take in life, they all come with problems. Did you know? They actually end up taking longer. So if you want something in the short run, that's fine, but it typically causes more problems. For the real things in life, there is no shortcut. It's the process or not at all. Ask for patience. The I is something that I would never have said, so that's why I mentioned Chuck Swindoll, but it did challenge me, so that's why I want to share it. Imagine the worst case scenario. Imagine the worst case. Now, I'm an optimistic person. I like to believe. And oftentimes, I'm like you guys, and I can see it in your life too. See, what I like to do is I can have a false optimism that gives me a false hope. Anybody do that? There's no reason why I should have hope. I haven't changed anything, but I think it's all going to work out. Is that what you think? And you think that's a good thing. It's not. You see, I've planted bad seed. I've planted peanuts, and I think cotton's going to come up. Is that what you think? Oh, no, but it's just going to work out. Is that what you think? I need to read you a verse. We read it 2 weeks ago, but I know we don't get it because I know I don't get it, so I know you don't get it, okay? So I'm going to read it to you again just because I think some of us need it. Just put it in the margin. This is from the wisdom book of the Proverbs. Proverbs 22, verse 3. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple, they keep going and they suffer for it. The prudent, the wise, they see life is connected. They see the path and they know what's down further. See, they see the storm coming and they take refuge. That's what the wise do. That's what God wants you to do. But the simple, the simpleton, can I say it in terms we understand? The stupid, sorry, I didn't say it. That's actually the translation of the word. The stupid, you know what they do? They look down the path and see danger too. But you know what they say? What are you going to do? I'm just going to keep going. Well, what's going to happen? It's just going to work out. No, it isn't. That's exactly what he's saying. See, because direction trumps intention every single time. You starting to feel this thing? I just want to make sure we get it today. See? That I have good intention, so it's just going to work out. But that's not true. It's the direction of your feet. Think about the worst case. That's what we're talking about here, not being falsely optimistic. I'm not saying look at life through poop-colored glasses. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that have rose-colored glasses on, but they're not changing behavior and just think it's going to work out. It's not. And you're wondering, and by the way, you're doing exactly what they do. God, how come I'm not blessed? Like Sarah, how could you do this? It's God's fault, right? Be careful, right? We violate God's principles, and then we ask God, why am I getting this bad harvest? And now he's helping you. I'm not saying he won't help you. I'm going to get to that. But I just want to make sure we get. Don't just think it's all going to work out. So imagine before you do this. But imagine before you make this decision and you go, you know what, it's just not that big of a deal. I just don't want to be petty. I don't really think it matters. And then you come to my office and go, I can't believe, how come God's not blessing me when I haven't followed any of his principles and I break myself against them? And then we go, hey, can you fix me? Well, we can, but it's not going to happen overnight. But you keep blaming God. You starting to see? Every time you think about it, just ask yourself this question: is there peace in the Middle East? And that'll bring you back around as it's bringing me around. And then the final one is this, the T. Think of the collateral damage. If we actually asked ourselves that in many things, you know the scariest thing for any soldier on the planet is the collateral damage. You know, the people I counsel with, and I'm not a counselor, but I do send them to counseling, but the things that they've shared with me, you know what I hear the most is the nightmares they have because of the collateral damage. You know, it's not just on the battlefield. You know that? When you choose not to wait on God, you will always hurt people. When you choose to appease instead of confront in love, there'll be collateral damage. It will hurt you. It'll hurt the other person. And it'll hurt everybody around you. If Abraham was here and could come out on this stage, you know what I think he would say? He would say, that's right. It hurt me. I had to send my own son away. Oh, God took care of him. But I'd give anything to go back. If I could give you some advice today, I would tell you don't do that, right? It hurt everybody. It hurt the entire world. Yeah. Always pause and seek God. If there's anything I think he would say, he'd say, I would give anything to go back to that moment and just pray. If I had, right? You know, the only one that prayed, it's interesting, is Hagar. And God showed up. Had Abraham or Sarah done it, he would have shown up for them too. So here's how I want to end. I want to challenge two different types of people. The first person is this. You're right before it. You're here today and you're frantic and you're getting ready to make a big mistake. And you've talked yourself into the culture. You've talked yourself into it, and you're thinking about making that decision because everybody else does it, and it's just going to work out, and that's what everybody's been telling you. And you know what God's saying? He sent a word here for you today. Don't do it. All right. Take a look at this, read through it again, and hold on to it, and just ask yourself, because there's going to be a draw to it like you can't believe. All right. I got to act right now. But if you'll just pause, be still and know that he is God. Right in the middle of all the turmoil, that's what that verse means. That's the first person. And if that's you, then if you need help praying, just let me know. Just for you, it would just be, this is the word I have. Just receive the word from God today. The second person is the one you've already made the mistake. See? You've already done it, and you're going, thanks a lot for sharing what I did, but I'm too late, right? You're Abram and Sarah after the fact, right? And now you have a Hagar and Ishmael, and what do I do with my Ishmael? They're here. You see, I don't believe that God shared this story so that he could just go, if you make any mistakes, I'm going to pound you down, right? That's not what he means. And I don't think you're dismissing it. You might be. Maybe you're here today and all you've done your whole life is blame everybody else, but maybe there's just a realization that you could let just a little bit of truth in that says, you know what, I might have to examine myself just a tad. Maybe I did something, and I want life to be different. You know what, I don't think God wants to hurt you. He wants to help you. He doesn't want you to get stuck in guilt. He wants to heal you. You see, next week we're going to talk about the son of promise. It may not be what you think. You see, a lot of people think this story is a story of racism, that God hates the Arab and God loves Israel, and that's what the story is about. That couldn't be further from the truth. God is not a racist. Isaac wasn't great just because he came from a line of Abraham, who, by the way, created both nations. He created many more, by the way. Some of them at odds with each other today and all of that. The son of promise wasn't just about the people. It was about the person who would come through them, Jesus Christ. And do you know what Jesus Christ is saying to you? John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. You know, that applies to the person that's never had it, but it also applies to the person that had it, like Abraham. You know, here's the cool part about the story of Abraham. Abraham has an Ishmael, and he is the father of faith. Abraham has an Ishmael, and he is a friend of God. That's what it's said about him. There's no greater person of faith. It's saying it isn't if you have an Ishmael, it's when. We all have it, right? And he's telling you what to do with your Ishmael. You know what you do? You put him in God's hand. Oh, I know there's not peace. I know there's consequences. I know if he had it do over again, he would say, let's not do that, but I can't, right? You know what he's telling you today? He's saying, take your Ishmael and give them to me. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world. John 3:17 says, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. So if that's you today, you know what you got to do? Put your Ishmael in his hand. See? I know, it's your son. I know you messed up. I know you need a second chance, and he is the God of the second chance. That's what the son of promise is all about. Did you know? And he's saying, if you would do that, I could give him purpose. If you did that, I could repurpose him. You can say what you want about the Arabic nations, but they're still here. God has blessed them like he said he would. So here's where I want to end today. Just one verse from the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah was writing to a country, and he was warning them. He said, look, there's going to come a time when you can't lean hard into self. There's going to come a time that I know you think you're a mighty warrior, but even the warriors will fall. He said, you know what, even the young men who have all the strength, and the old men that think if I was like a young man and I had all the strength, he said, but there is a time where something's going to come so hard against you, and I have a feeling somebody's there, that you will fall. But then he said this, but those who wait on the Lord, in the NIV version, it says those that hope in the Lord. Can I tell you that those two words are simultaneous? That if you wait on the Lord, you'll have hope. And if you hope in the Lord, you can wait. It says those that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Will you wait on the Lord? Can I pray for you today? Let's stand for prayer. Father God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for this journey that we're on. Lord, I don't have a lot of words because I really believe that the only thing now is for you to penetrate the heart. So that's what I'm going to pray directly to you. Lord, I don't want to speak through my prayers. I've heard some of my prayers and I realize, Lord, sometimes I'm preaching through my prayer. I don't mean it that way. So I want to talk directly to you, Lord. I pray for the one that needs a God who sees. You see them, Lord. Open the eyes of their heart. Let them see you. I pray for the one that's frantic and hurt and hurting and blaming and all those things. Help them see that there's a God who loves them right where they are and too much to leave them there. I pray for the one that's been abused, God, that you can help them, you can heal them, you can help them with their Ishmael. I pray for the one, Lord, that is like Abraham, who's appeased, and the one that's like Sarah, who's so hurt, that hurting people hurt people. Maybe that's where we all are, I don't know. You put a bunch of people in a church, and it's amazing how church people are sometimes the most evil people on the planet. God, I pray, help us not to be that. Open the eyes of our heart, Lord, and help us, and not trust you. Lord, I know the word that you've given, and I know, Lord, for a fact that Lord, you want us to wait on you and not keep questioning the days because you've done enough for us to trust you. So I pray, Lord, for the one that doesn't know you, let them call out to you right now and receive you. I pray for the one that does but has gotten far off the path that they'll come back to you. And Lord, I do pray for the one stuck in guilt today, the one that's scared to death because they have an Ishmael and they don't know what to do. I don't know what it is. It could be a thing. It could be a person, Lord. A person that maybe they even created and they don't know what to do because they've messed up so bad. Let them see Jesus. That's what I do right now, Lord. I speak Jesus over them right now, Lord. The forgiveness and the plan and all the stuff that they need is all found in him. The first thing they need isn't guilt. The first thing they need isn't a plan. It's the love of God washing over them. And from that, Lord, you will help put their life in a way that they can't even imagine. God will give you all the honor and glory and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Before you go, I got to tell you, we got 2 more messages, so we got a lot more. So please come back next week. For everybody else, God bless you. Have a great week.